Welcome to Evidence Mastery. So what if the very foundation of how we approve new medicines is changing right before our very eyes? Well, it is. Today, we're going to dive into the rise of real-world evidence and how it's absolutely revolutionizing drug regulation.
Everything we're talking about today is drawn from the incredible expertise in Chapter 10 of the book, Real-World Evidence, Principles and Practice, by the one and only Dr. Masoud Tousi.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with this new era of evidence, then look at the big three regulators, talk about what makes RWE credible, check out some global trends, and finally, wrap it all up. Let's get to it.
All right, first up, why is the world of regulatory decision-making going through such a massive shakeup? Let's dig in. Okay, so for decades, the randomized controlled trial, the RCT, has been the undisputed king. And look, it's fantastic for proving a drug can work, under perfect, super-controlled conditions. But real-world evidence comes from messy, actual clinical practice with all kinds of different patients. It tells us how a drug actually does work out in the community, and that, my friends, is a crucial distinction. Now, the key thing for regulators isn't just about having a ton of data, it's about having the right data. You have to ask, is the evidence fit for purpose? In other words, is it good enough to answer the very specific question we're asking? This principle is the absolute bedrock of how all modern real-world evidence is evaluated. So, how are the world's leading agencies? We're talking the FDA in the US, the EMA in Europe, and the MHRA in the UK. How are they actually putting this powerful idea into practice? Over in the United States, the FDA's journey got a huge push from something called the 21st Century Cures Act. This wasn't just a gentle suggestion, it was a law telling the FDA, hey, you need to create clear, formal ways to use this real-world evidence in your decisions.
And that has led to some really groundbreaking decisions. Take Keytruda, a huge cancer drug. RWE from electronic health records helped show how the trial findings applied to a broader group of people. Or Verzenio, another cancer drug, where RWE helped confirm that the drug was still effective even when doctors had to tweak the dose in the real world. That's powerful stuff.
Now let's hop across the Atlantic. The European Medicines Agency, or EMA, does things a little differently. They take a much more collaborative approach. See, because they're dealing with so many different countries, their big focus is on building data networks that can standardize how RWE is used across the entire European Union. The case of the drug fostamatinib is a perfect example. The clinical trial data was pretty solid, but regulators were a little worried about the risks in older patients. So, an RWE study came in and provided that crucial, valuable supportive information. It basically gave the committee the confidence boost they needed to say yes to the drug.
Meanwhile, the UK's MHRA is kind of carving out its own path, especially after Brexit. They're all about being agile and innovative. The goal? To use RWE to get important new medicines to patients faster, but, and this is a big but, without ever sacrificing scientific rigor.
And get this for a real-world example. During the COVID-19 pandemic, an RWE study using the amazing Open Safely database confirmed that Paxlovid led to a 51% reduction in hospitalizations. But here's the really incredible part. Those results were incorporated into official safety updates in just 6 weeks. Talk about speed and impact.
So, we've seen how different agencies are using RWE, but what actually makes a study credible in the first place? How do you build a case that a regulator anywhere in the world is actually going to trust?
Well, it turns out there's a growing consensus. Around the world, reviewers are looking for these 5 key things. You need a super clear research question, you have to control for biases, you have to prove your data is solid, your work has to be reproducible, and you need to test your findings every which way. These are pretty much non-negotiables.
The EMA, for example, is super clear about this. They have specific domains they look at for data quality, and they expect you to be totally transparent about everything, from how much data is missing to whether you've done studies to double-check that the electronic records actually match the original patient charts.
Now, this whole movement isn't just happening in the US and Europe. Oh no, it's a truly global thing. But, like any new frontier, it comes with some pretty significant challenges.
I mean, just take a look at this. These are just some of the major initiatives happening all over the world. You've got the FDA Sentinel system, Europe's Darwin EU network. Even the World Health Organization has a task force now. Everybody is building up their RWE capabilities.
And this is leading to some really cool innovations, like creating synthetic control arms for trials in rare diseases, where it's almost impossible to have a real comparison group. But at the same time, we're still wrestling with big hurdles, like navigating all the different international data privacy laws. It requires clever solutions, like something called federated analysis, where the data stays put and only the results get shared.
But a huge question remains, and it's a really important one. For clinical trials, we have registries to make sure we hear about both the good and the bad results. How do we do that for RWE? It's absolutely crucial that we learn from the studies that fail just as much as from the ones that succeed.
So, after all that, what's the big takeaway from this massive shift in how we think about evidence for new medicines? Well, the conclusion is pretty clear, and it's a powerful one. Real-world evidence is no longer just a nice-to-have. It's not just a little something extra. It is rapidly becoming a core, foundational pillar of modern drug evaluation. Period.
To really dive deeper and truly master the science and the strategy of this new frontier, the amazing resource we've been using today, Real-World Evidence, Principles and Practice, is available for you right now on Amazon.com. Don't miss out.